26th of October 2022. I found myself in a helicopter flying above unspoilt forests in Indonesia with just one thought that wouldn't go away. There's not much of this left.
Deforestation has skyrocketed.
Nature is under attack.
It's a problem we've been putting off for decades, but now we've reached the crunch point.
A massive deal that has just been signed in Montreal.
The United Nations Biodiversity Conference that took place in Montreal less than 2 months after my trip spelled out the scale of ambition we need to embrace.
Well, the landmark deal is to protect 30% of the world's oceans and land by 2030.
30 by 30 sounds like it's just playing with numbers, but it's a huge commitment. My name's Toby Webb, and I run a company that deals with big businesses that aim to be serious about sustainability. And I'm clear about one thing: what we did in the past is not going to be what we do in the future. I'm left wondering what sort of leaders are going to appear that are capable of running successful and profitable businesses while delivering that huge public duty.
Sustainability leader, what are we talking about?
Transformative leadership that can help you in your journey towards a better future.
Changing the psychology of the leader is what will change a business faster than anything else.
The bosses of the past could indulge Milton Friedman's outdated notion that the business of business was business, which is just another way of saying you could focus on profits and you could ignore anything that wasn't required by law.
That's not going to cut it anymore. We need new leadership that's going to understand the urgency of where we are today.
What does that leadership look like? It won't be a generation of saints, but it will be leadership framed differently. And it was the search for this leadership that led me to Indonesia in the first place. Specifically, to look at what this company, April, is doing. Because it doesn't even talk about 30%. It says that nature needs half. Half the land can be used for productive purposes. The other half must be maintained as nature intended. Maybe it's crazy, but just maybe, it's the sort of place we can see the first signs of that new type of leader. So that took me to the RER Eco Research Camp in Indonesia. This is Brad Sanders, April's man on the ground.
I'm the head of operations for April's Riau ecosystem restoration.
Riau is on the east coast of Sumatra, and it's where April has been finding its way to a new approach with the 150,000 hectare conservation area it has there at the core, with its plantations around the outside. I spoke to Brad, and I had to wonder, why would a company like April get involved with such a thing?
Well, we take an integrated approach. The plantations need the forests need the plantations. The plantations need the forest as the natural capital, as the source of biodiversity, water, and other ecosystem services to keep that plantation productive. The forest needs the plantation to generate income in order to pay for the cost of managing and operating the RER area.
And let's be clear, not that long ago, April was just another of the companies being criticised by the environmental campaign groups for exploiting the forest. It has a past.
Supply a company called April, which makes disposable packaging and paper.
But this was a standard way of doing business. In common with other forest-based businesses in Indonesia, April had concessions from the government to develop plantations. And in developing those plantations, it deforested land, faced protests from village communities and from campaign groups. That was then. So what's the leadership change that takes it into significant new territory? This is Anderson Tanoto. He's the managing director of RGE, Royal Golden Eagle, the parent company of April. It's a family firm founded by his father. I had the chance to discuss it with him.
Hello, Anderson.
Our team has worked very closely with you a number of times, but it's really nice to finally meet you in person as well.
I asked him about what I'd seen and asked for his take on what the company was doing there.
50% of Riau province is actually on peatlands. So the reality for us is to make sure that we manage peatland responsibly. First, we must reduce emissions. Right? There's a recognition that operations on peatland has some level of emissions, and we must reduce that by good management, good water management, prevention of fires, and ensuring that actually the moistness of the peat layer is as high as possible. There's also an appreciation that tropical peatland has been understudied and a lack of understanding of tropical peatland in terms of emissions. These are flux towers that measures tier 1 emissions data, whether it's carbon dioxide, methane emissions, sequestration of carbon as well from the plantation trees. So we would like to generate the data and be able to actually make better decisions.
All of which sounds fantastic. It's not entirely uncontroversial. Some of the environmental campaign groups would hold on to an uncompromising stance that you should never do anything on peatland. April's argument is that practically this is better than the alternative.
When you look away from the forest, it doesn't stay intact. There are encroachers that come in. Restoration actually starts with protection, assessment, and then restoration, and then management, right? But the first one is protection.
But what about those ambitious UN targets for biodiversity?
Anderson, is this just one small project, or can it be an approach that will scale?
My dream actually is not to have one RER, is to have tens and tens of RER. If we can really do that, I think conservation forests will be in a much better place in Indonesia. And again, we've launched this one-for-one strategy in Brazil last year, and we're actually launching and publishing a very clear roadmap how we're going to get there in São Paulo and Bahia, in the two states that we're operating in. The same model can be applied to a lot of developing countries, whether it's in Africa, whether that's in South Asia, amongst others. So I do believe our production protection model, the one-for-one model, or the nature needs half model implemented in a commercially viable manner can be a very, very good model globally.
10 years ago, nobody was talking like this. But right now, it's impossible to hide from the scale of the challenge we face. So surely it means that April should be the start of a trend, not an isolated case. And for that to be true, Anderson and his team need to show that it can work.
If we do the right things, share the data, others will follow suit. Environmental sustainability is business sustainability. If you're not going to be able to grow your Acacia crassicharpa sustainably on peatlands, that is a huge business risk.
And here's a key message for those who would follow suit.
What I realize a lot in this sustainability space is that consistency matters. Too many companies are coming up with too many commitments, and the consistency of implementation and monitoring and reporting and verification is weak. And this is why companies will have a lot of challenges with allegations of greenwashing, amongst others. The consistency of implementation is what makes the biggest difference.
That feels to me like the biggest challenge. With many of the companies I deal with, changes in leadership come frequently, and changes in strategy inevitably follow. Having seen some of this in action with my own eyes, I might be biased, but perhaps a business like April, with a stable family base, may be able to achieve things that others find more difficult. At the very least, it's worth watching.